kwa sababu ile machine zilikuwa hapa zilikuwa kuukuu za zamani, almost derelict, na ndio tulianza kupanga mambo ya modernization ya KCC. Mimi nafurahi kwamba leo tumetumia kama serikali in the last almost 6-7 years, tumetumia karibu shilingi bilioni 2 in the modernization of the facilities of KCC. Na nimefurahi sana kwamba leo nimepata nafasi ya kufika hapa. Nilienda katika hiyo mpango, tulisema modernize facility hii ya Kiganjo, modernize facility ya Nyahururu, ya Eldoret, ya Sotik, ya Nyambene, ya Miritini, ya Dandora, mimi na ya Kitale. Kuna zile tumekamilisha kama hii, kama ya Eldoret, kama ya Sotik, kama ya Nyahururu. Kuna zile ambazo ziko katika awamu ya mwisho katika modernization program. Moja yao ikiwa Nyambene, ingine ikiwa Miritini, ya Kitale. Na mimi nataka ni shukuru shirika la KCC kwa ile kazi wamefanya, na wakulima wengi sasa wako na nafasi ya kuuza maziwa yao mahali ambapo processing inaweza kufanyika tukitumia facilities ya kisasa. Mimi najua ya kwamba bado tuko na safari katika hii program ya mambo ya maziwa. Na ndio mkiona katika manifesto yetu tumekubaliana ya kwamba ndani ya miaka 5 tunataka kuongeza maziwa tunayozalisha kama taifa kutoka lita bilioni 5.2 mpaka lita bilioni 10. That is our plan in the next 5 years, to increase milk production in Kenya from 5.2 billion liters to 10 billion liters. Maziwa inatupatia karibu bilioni 200 kila mwaka. In fact, it is among the highest influencers of our incomes as a nation. Maziwa ambayo inafanywa processing, maziwa ambayo inauzwa bado haijafanywa processing, na tunazidi na kutafuta mbinu na namna ya kuhakikisha kwamba we do more processing of our milk, do less sale of raw milk, because by doing more processing, we add more value and farmers get a better pay for their milk. Tuko na mpango ambayo itatusaidia kuongeza pesa ambayo itafika kwa mkulima, na vile vile kuongeza maziwa tunayozalisha kama taifa. We have a plan on how we are going to move our milk production from 5.2 billion liters to 10 billion liters. And we are going to implement that plan together with the farmers. The farmers will be front and center of that plan. Na ni vizuri tukubaliane na wakulima vile kazi hiyo tutafanya kwa pamoja. Tumekubaliana kwamba mambo ya mbegu ya ile ng'ombe tuko nazo, tumeweka pesa ya kutosha katika mambo ya mambo ya kuhakikisha kwamba tuko na mbegu, and we have put a lot of money in research. Kagri, tumekubaliana na Kagri ya kwamba number 1, tunataka kuhakikisha ya kwamba mbegu zinazopatikana Kenya ni mbegu ambayo itatusaidia kupata ng'ombe za nyama na ng'ombe za maziwa. Na tumekubaliana vile vile ya kwamba bei ambayo tunalipisha wakulima wapate mbegu itoke shilingi karibu 5,000, tunataka ikuje shilingi 500 hapo 200, na tumekubaliana. Na mimi nataka niambie wizara ambayo inahusika to continuously monitor to make sure that we have the right seeds, we have the right breed of our cattle, because it is a very big influencer of the drive against poverty in our country. That is our intervention number 1. Intervention number 2 is this modernization program. Mambo ya processing, kama tunatumia factory ya zamani, ile efficiency ya kuhakikisha kwamba tuna process milk na pesa nyingi haipotei kwa mambo ya processing, modernization is going to be very important. Mimi nataka niutangazie wakulima ya kwamba for the next 3 years, and I'm happy the chair of the budget committee is sitting here, for the next 3 years, we are going to spend 3 billion shillings in the modernization program of our KCC facilities. Tumekubaliana tutakamilisha Kitale. Tutakamilisha tayari katika budget ama supplementary budget tuliopitisha before this main budget. Tulipatia KCC shilingi milioni 700 so that we can complete the facility in Nyambene. We can complete the facility in Kitale under the new program. Tunataka kukamilisha Kitale, tunataka kubadilisha Eldoret iwe instant milk ambayo inaweza kutumika mara moja. Tunataka kuweka facility ya processing hapa Runyenjes, kwa sababu pale Runyenjes bado iko na matatizo. We have a factory lakini haina vifaa ya kutosha. Tutakamilisha ya Nyambene, tutakamilisha ya Miritini, na tunataka kuweka kiwanda mpya Narok, kwa sababu wakulima wa Narok wanahangaika na maziwa yao, especially kina mama, kwa sababu kina mama wengi ndio wanashughulika Kajiado na Narok katika mambo ya maziwa. So my instructions to KCC Waziri is that part of the program in the modernization is to have a plant in Narok, because many farmers in Narok maziwa yao inapotea. So modernization is going to be our other program to make sure that when farmers produce milk, as a government, we have a program on how that milk is going to be turned into money, and that money should go to the farmers. Namba ya 3, tuko na mpango ambayo tumefanya ya milk coolers. Matatizo mingi ya wakulima, nilikuwa jana Mkuruweni. Wakulima wengi wanahangaika na maziwa barabarani, kwa sababu ile process ya kufikisha maziwa mahali ambapo inaweza kuanza kushughulikiwa na mambo ya processing inachukua muda mrefu. Na ikichukua muda mrefu, maziwa ile inashuka, quality yake inakuja chini, kwa sababu milk is a very perishable product. So kusaidia kuhakikisha kwamba wakulima wanapata bei ya sawasawa na quality ya milk ya taifa letu la Kenya ni quality ya juu, tumeweka mpango ya milk coolers 650 ambazo tutazileta tuzisambaze katika kila mpango. Nia yetu ni at least tufikishe kila ward milk cooler, ndio tuhakikisha kwamba hasa katika sekta ama sehemu zile tuko na mambo ya maziwa, tunazalisha chakula maziwa ya kutosha, tuwe na milk coolers, ndio tuzitumie kukusanya maziwa, kuprocess ama kutoa maziwa, kufanya chilling, ndio mkulima awe na nafasi ya kutosha ya kuhakikisha kwamba maziwa yake inafika mahali ambapo inatakikana. Na vile vile itatusaidia katika hii mambo ya transport. Mimi najua wakulima wengi hapa wako na matatizo, hata ingawaje tunalipa shilingi 50, lakini 50 haifiki kwa mkulima. Ile inafika kwa mkulima ni pengine 45, mahali ingine 47, mahali ingine 43 na vitu kama hizo. Na inapotelea hapo katikati kwa transport, na sijui kumanage cooperative na nini hapo. So tunataka tukubaliane kwa sababu tunataka shilingi 50 ifike kwa mkulima. So my instructions to KCC is that let us begin to think about how we are going to cut out costs and to cut out brokers and to eliminate unnecessary expenses so that mkulima aweze kupata ile 50 iende kwa mfuko yake. Hapo tujipange na hawa watu wengine. Na mimi nataka pia niwaulize cooperatives ambao wanashughulika na hii kazi. Tafadhali, kwa sababu kuna cooperatives wanaweka pesa nyingi kwa hiyo process. Tunataka tukubaliane na cooperatives ya kwamba mkulima ndio mtu ya muhimu. Bila ya mkulima, maziwa ya mkulima, hii mlolongo yote hapa ni bure. Kwa sababu bila ya mkulima huko nyuma kuzalisha maziwa, hii watu yote hapa sijui mtu ya kuuza pesa, sijui cooperative iko hapo katikati, sijui transporter iko hapo katikati, sijui processor hako mahali gani. Bila ya ule mwenye ana produce, hii msururu yote hii ni watu watapotea. So it is in the interest of processors, it is in the interest of transporters, it is in the interest of cooperatives, it is in the interest of the financial institutions and SACCOs that the mkulima is making money. If mkulima is not making money, all of you will be jobless. Tunakubaliana jameni watu wa hapa. So tumekubaliana hiyo maneno. Tumekubaliana hiyo maneno ya kwamba hiyo mpango yote lazima kwanza the farmer is king. Huyo ndio ataamua kama sisi wote tuko kazini ama tumepotea. So tunataka tushughulike katika hali hiyo. So ile milk coolers ambayo tutasambaza, na nimetumana, waziri yuko hapa, nilituma PS wake huyu aende Poland, na tumekubaliana na wizara ya fedha. Ni mpango wa karibu shilingi bilioni 8 ambayo tuko nayo, ambayo itatusaidia kwa hiyo plan ya milk coolers. My instructions are that before December, the milk coolers should be in Kenya, distributed to all the farmers in all the areas. I know it can be done earlier. Tumekubaliana it is going to start in the next 1 month. Lakini before December, all of them must be in every part of Kenya. Na mimi pia nataka niulize wabunge, tusaidiane, niulize governors, tusaidiane kwa sababu sisi tutaleta milk coolers. Nyinyi ndio mtatusaidia tutaweka mahali gani. Ndio muweze kujenga ile infrastructure kidogo ambayo inahitajika pale, so that we can set up the facilities and make sure that the farmers are benefiting. So milk coolers is going to be one of our interventions. Vile vile tumeweka mpango ya fertilizer. Watu wengi walikuwa hawaelewi hii fertilizer itatusaidia kwa njia gani. Wale wanaweka sufuria kwa kichwa, they don't know. Na kumangamanga kwa maandamano. Hawaelewi ya kwamba hii fertilizer tumeteremusha bei iko na uhusiano na bei ya maziwa. Kwa sababu to reduce the cost of production, ni lazima tufanye mambo kadhaa. Ni nini tunafanya kama serikali? Wakulima nataka niwaeleze. Jambo la kwanza, tumesema mbolea. Tunapunguza gharama ya mbolea kwa sababu tunajua mbolea inawasaidia kupanda malisho ya chakula ya ng'ombe. Mambo ya silage, mambo ya cotton, maneno ya soya na mambo ya lusan na hiyo mimea ingine yote ambayo inatumia fertilizer. Sasa tunataka mtumie hiyo fertilizer kuzalisha chakula zaidi, ndio tuweze kuzalisha maziwa yetu kwa bei ya chini, ndio ile pesa tunalipwa sehemu kubwa iende kwa profit ya mkulima. Jambo la pili, katika budget yetu hii pia tumetoa ushuru kwa animal feed products, zile products ambazo tunatumia kutengeneza animal feed. Leo katika baraza letu la mawaziri hapa Sagana tumeauthorize yellow maize na bidhaa zingine ambazo zinatumika kwa mambo ya animal feed kwamba they can now be imported without duty. Tuhakikishe ya kwamba mbali na kuondoa ushuru ya VAT, pia tumeondoa ushuru ya duty. Ndio tuhakikishe ya kwamba animal feed, chakula ya mifugo yetu, inafika kwa mkulima kwa bei ya chini. Na mimi nataka niulize wale wanatengeneza animal feed, kwa sababu sisi tunaondoa ushuru kama serikali, lakini hawa wanaotengeneza hiyo animal feed wanakuja kuchukua hiyo ushuru, wanafanya inakuwa profit yao, mkulima anaendelea kununua chakula ya ng'ombe kwa ile bei ya jana. So I want the ministry to monitor. We must transfer the benefits of the tax exemptions not to the manufacturers of animal feed but to the farmers. Hatujatoa ushuru ati ndio mtu ya kutengeneza chakula hapo kwa factory atengeneze pesa nyingi. Our plan is to benefit the farmer, and we must see as government, and the ministry must monitor to make sure that the interventions that we are making, when we forgo taxes, it must be for the benefit of the farmer, not for the benefit of the processors of animal feed somewhere in the middle. Tunaelewana jameni? So nyinyi kama wakulima pia mtatupatia habari. Mkiona hii chakula haijabadilika bei na tumeondoa ushuru, tumeondoa duty, tumeondoa VAT, mtueleze ndio tukabiliane na wale ambao wako huko katikati, tuwaambie pesa ambayo we are forgoing as a government is not for them, it is for our farmers. Vile vile tumekubaliana ya kwamba ili wakulima pia waweze kupata namna ya kununua ng'ombe zaidi, mambo ya seasonal crop program, kama mnapanda soya, kama mnapanda mahindi, kama mnapanda chakula ya ng'ombe. Vile vile tumeweka shilingi bilioni 10 credit kwa Agricultural Finance Corporation. Nilitangaza juzi, waziri anashughulika, wakulima wengi wanaelewa na wako na uhusiano na Agricultural Finance Corporation. Tumeweka pale pesa na tumesema the interest must not exceed 8%. We want to have it in single digit. Tumegombana na hao, bado wanaongea Kiingereza, lakini tutawafundisha Kiswahili. Sindio? Ndio lugha ya kueleweka na wananchi wengi. So tutashughulika na hawa, tuhakikishe ya kwamba access to credit is a critical component of making sure that we reduce the cost of production. Kwa sababu tunataka on one side tuki-improve prices, pia huku chini tuna lower the costs of production so that we can have more benefit to our farmers. Vile vile mimi nataka niupongeze wakulima. Wakulima wetu na product ambayo mnazalisha is of such a quality that we have access to the American market. Najua kule Marekani ni watu ambao wanachunguza mambo mengi, phytosanitary hii, sijui nini ile, quality hii, quality ile, but I can proudly say that our products meet the highest standards of quality anywhere in the world. Na kwa sababu hiyo, sasa nimeweka mpango kamili ya kupanga soko ya mazao yetu ama products yetu ya maziwa ama kilimo ya maziwa. Ili ghee yetu, butter na powder milk pamoja na long life milk tuweze kupanua ile soko kubwa iko katika bara letu la Afrika, kwa sababu nchi nyingi, sitaki kusema majina, niliingia kwa matatizo kidogo, nilisema majina ya nchi zingine nikapata taabu kidogo. Tuko na soko kubwa katika bara letu la Afrika ya maziwa, na hiyo soko lazima tufanye juu chini mpaka tuhakikishe hiyo soko ina benefit wakulima wetu. Hatuwezi kukubali ati maziwa inatoka New Zealand kilomita karibu 10,000 na sisi tuko hapa kilomita 200, na tunaweza kufikisha mazao yetu pale na wakulima are producing the milk. Mimi nataka niwaambie pia wakulima wa taifa letu la Kenya wasikuwe na wasiwasi. Hata tukipata maziwa zaidi ya vile tunaweza kupata soko ya Kenya hapa, tuko na facilities ya kutosha ya kutengeneza powder milk, ya kutengeneza long life milk. Hii Kiganjo hapa sasa tuko na uwezo ya mambo ya powder milk. Tuko na kutengeneza powder milk katika factory yetu ya Eldoret. And which other factory? The powder milk? And Kitale. So we have 3 facilities that we can use to make sure that excess milk we can mop out from the market, na ndio bei ya maziwa isirudi chini. Mkulima awe anaweza kupredict ya kwamba akizalisha maziwa yake itanunuliwa na hataenda kwa hasara. Kwa sababu saa zingine mkulima akiuza maziwa shilingi 30, shilingi 20, mkulima anakuwa discouraged, tunaenda kwa hasara. That is our other intervention, to make sure that we create market. Na nimekubali ya kwamba soko ya nchi yetu pia, katika ile program yetu ya school feeding program, ambayo mwaka huu tumeongeza kutoka wanafunzi kidogo zaidi ya 1,000,000. Sasa tumesema kuanzia mwaka huu watoto wetu 4,000,000 watakuwa wanapata mambo ya school feeding shuleni. Na sasa nimekubaliana na chairman Bwana Maina ambaye alisema tuingize program ya maziwa katika hiyo mpango ya school feeding. I agree with you, and I will communicate to the Ministry of Education so that milk can be part of the package for our school feeding program, ndio tuweze kupanua soko ya wakulima wetu wa maziwa. Nataka vile vile niwahakikishie, tukiwa tunatafuta soko ya kitaifa na tunatafuta soko ya kimataifa, pia tutahakikisha ya kwamba watu ambao wanatafuta kutengeneza pesa ya haraka kwenda kutuletea sijui powder milk kutoka sijui nchi gani, alafu wanaingiza ukora huko ndani, wanalete hapa, tunaenda hasara, wanakuja wanacompete na maziwa ya wakulima wetu. Hiyo mlango tutafunga. Chairman wa Dairy Board na watu wa Dairy Board, nyinyi watu tuko hapa na board ya Dairy Board, simameni watu ya Dairy Board, simameni the Dairy Board people. One of the directors, wale directors wengine hawako, waambie tafadhali tusikosane, you know. Kazi ya Dairy Board ni kuchunga haki ya mkulima, sio kuchunga haki ya processors. That is not their business. Their business is to make sure that our farmers are not undermined. Our local production is not undermined. Hiyo poda tunaona inatolewa kwa nchi zingine kupitia milango na madirisha ya nyuma. Hiyo madirisha yote ifungwe na hiyo milango yote ifungwe, ndio wakulima hawa wapate nafuu, tuweze kuendelea. For the last couple of years, you can see it. For the last couple of years, watu wamekuwa wakilete powder milk hapa karibu lita 100,000,000 kila mwaka. Na ndio tunapata hasara, wakulima wanaingia kwa matatizo. Watu wananunua maziwa kidogo ya mkulima, alafu wanaweka powder 3/4 na kutumia leseni ya kusema ya kwamba wanafanya mambo ya maziwa. So we will increase our own capacity. Katika hii modernization program yetu, tunataka kuongeza capacity ya KCC from 380,000 liters to 800,000 liters. Na ndio tuanze kushughulikia soko yetu ya Kenya na soko ya kimataifa. Wakulima tunaelewana? Sasa nyinyi wakulima mko na kazi yenu. Nataka mnisikize kwa makini. Mimi nitafanya hii nyingine. Si mnaona hii, mnajua hii, mmesikia ile mimi nafanya? Nafukuzana na wakora. Nataka mnafanya modernization na watafutia milk coolers na watafutia pesa ya kuendesha hiyo biashara yenu. Ndio hiyo mimi na ngangana na mambo ya fertilizer. Na nyinyi pia nataka mnihakikishie ya kwamba mtaongeza mazao yetu ya maziwa katika taifa letu la Kenya. Si tunagawana kazi. Kila mtu afanye ile ako na ujuzi ya kufanya. Sasa mimi nitashughulika upande hii na nyinyi mtashughulika upande huo. Tunaelewana jameni? So we are going to work together. We will continuously refine. We will continuously refine the workings around this sector, kwa sababu ni sekta ya muhimu. Inatupatia ajira, inatupatia utajiri, na inawezesha watu wengi. Watu ambao wako katika hii sekta ni zaidi ya watu milioni 3. Pesa ambayo tunapata kwa hii sekta wakulima ni karibu shilingi bilioni 200 kila mwaka. Hiyo ni pesa nyingi na ni sehemu ambayo ni ya muhimu katika uchumi wa taifa letu la Kenya. Waziri ananiambia ya kwamba mambo mmekuwa mkituuliza, mnataka ile sixth semen. Kwa sababu unajua mkulima wa maziwa akipata ndama ya ndume ni hasara kubwa sana. Si ndio? Wewe unatafuta ng'ombe ambaye atakuzalia ng'ombe ya kukamua kesho. Ukipata ndume unapata hasara. So tumeweka mpango ya sex milk, ndio ng'ombe yako sex semen, ndio ng'ombe yako akizaa anazaa mwenye atakupatia maziwa 2 years down the road. So tunajua bei yake imekuwa, how much has been the price of sex semen? From imekuwa bei ya karibu shilingi 6,500 mpaka 8,000. Nimeambia waziri tulete kwanza mpaka 3,000 hapo, tupange na hapo. Let us cut it down by half. Tuanze hapo. Nyinyi mtajipanga na hapo. Alafu mkiendelea na muongee maneno yenu, nikiona mnajipanga vizuri nitaona vile nitafanya. Si ndio? Sisi tumekubaliana tunagawana hii kazi. So mimi nataka niseme hivyo, na nishukuru ya kwamba tuko na wabunge wetu ndio watusaidie kusukuma maneno kule bunge. Kwa sababu unajua tuko na watu wengi, sijui ni kwa kutojua ama sijui ni kwa mpango ya mabrokers, wanapinga mambo. Imagine ati hii maneno tumesema hapa ya coolers ya maziwa ya wakulima, ya kuweka pesa AFC, ya kupanga mambo ya fertilizer, ya kupanga mambo ya feed. Tumeondoa ushuru kwa feed. Ati kuna mtu anapinga. Sio watu ni wazimu. Ama namna gani? Unapinga nini? Alafu unaenda unatufanyia maandamano, unaharibu mali ya watu. Hiyo mchezo tumesema hatutaki. Ama namna gani wakulima? Si ndio? Tunataka tushirikiane, tupange vile Kenya itapiga hatua ya kwenda mbele, tujenge mali, tujenge utajiri, tuondoe umaskini, na hii ndio barabara. Kila mtu achangie sehemu ambayo anaweza. Bwana chairman wa budget, umesikia ile maneno nimesema. Sawa? Usikose. So enda ujipange na hapo. Na leader of majority anasikia hapo. Yeah? So tutashirikiana namna hiyo, tupange hiyo budget, tuhakikisha kwamba wakulima wetu wanashughulikiwa, na mimi nataka niwahakikishie hii Kenya tutaibadilisha. Na tutaibadilisha kwa mpango kama hii, na bidii ya wakulima, na mpango ya serikali ya kuhakikisha kwamba we are synergized, we are working together towards the same goal. Tusaidie wakulima, ndio wakulima wajenge uchumi wetu wa Kenya. Na mimi nataka niwapongeze wakulima wa ngamia, wafugaji wa ngamia. Leo hapa tumeanzisha sasa, kuna coordination. Maziwa ya ngamia ambayo imekuwa ikipotea huko katikati, na watu wengi by the way wanatafuta hii maziwa ya ngamia. So wakulima wafugaji, Bwana Guyo na jeshi yako ya kutoka ya kwenda mpaka Northern Kenya huko, jipange. Na hiyo milk coolers, waziri mpange pia hawa watu wa ngamia wapate hiyo milk coolers, ndio tulete maziwa ya ngamia tuweze pia kutumia kuendesha uchumi wa taifa letu la Kenya. Wakulima, mimi nimefurahi sana kuwa kati yenu. Na nataka niwahakikishie ya kwamba tutafanya bidii, kwa sababu hii ni sekta ya muhimu. Mkisoma katika manifesto yetu, tumesema ya kwamba sekta rahisi sana kubadilisha na kuboresha na kutusaidia kuongeza mapato ni sekta hii ya dairy. Dairy is one of our quickest intervention. na kuna maneno nitaongea na waziri kuhusu mambo ya breeds zaidi, ndio tuweze kuendesha hii kazi. Na mimi nataka niwashukuru even the other processors. I was in Meru, nilikuwa Meru juzi kwa ile kampuni inaitwa Meru Central. Wanafanya kazi mzuri sana, wanasaidia wakulima na wanawalipa wakulima on time, na wanashughulika na hiyo kazi. Nilikuwa pia Fresha kule Githunguri. They are doing a wonderful job. Na mimi nataka niwaambie tutasaidiana na hizo kampuni zote tuhakikisha kwamba wakulima wetu wote wanashughulikiwa, kwa sababu ni ya muhimu katika kujenga uchumi dhabiti wa taifa letu la Kenya. And this is how we are going to grow our nation. This is how we are going to build our nation, and we are going to make Kenya grow. So wakulima, mimi nataka niwashukuru sana. Pongezi kwa ile bidii mnafanya shambani. Mimi na waenzi sana na washukuru kwa sababu mnatusaidia kupanga mambo kule mashinani, na sisi tutawashikilia. Mimi nataka niwaulize, let us all of us diversify. Mjue ya kwamba you can grow many other products, and we are going to make sure that extension programs between us and the counties. Pia we want to digitize. Tunataka pia tuweke kwa mtandao kwamba mkulima anaweza kutumia simu yake kuona ni nini atafanya ndio maziwa yake iongezeke. Anahitaji kutumia nini, aongeze wapi, apange nini, ndio tuweze kusukumana sote katika barabara hiyo. But we are going to work together with all the leaders and work together with all the counties to make sure that this program succeeds. Sitaki kusema kuzidi hapo. Mimi nimefurahi sana. Asanteni sana, na watakia baraka ya Mungu, na nitakuja hivi karibuni pale Nyahururu tukuje tufungue hiyo na tutaenda Dandora, tutaenda Miritini. I have already issued instructions on what we need to do. Bwana Kilemi, wewe ndio mtu ya Cooperative na waziri wako, pangeni hiyo kazi. Na waziri wa kilimo pia yuko hapo, mtashirikiana. Asanteni sana. Mnafanya kazi mzuri, lakini mkaze kamba. Si ndio? So asanteni sana, Mungu awabariki. Thank you.
Big picture time, guys, and we've got a bonus episode for you. You thought we were done with the season, but here's one. Why are you so loud about what's going on in the country?
So we should not be paying debt. Now I say this because this is the biggest problem we are facing on the government account. It is the biggest reason, the biggest for the high cost of living. That the sovereign, which is you and I, do not owe anybody anything. And anybody who put their pen to that paper is the biggest liar. It's a fake budget, it's a fake finance bill, and we must call it out for that. They are sinking us further and further.
What then is the solution?
We must deal with the biggest outflow of our tax revenue, which is the debt.
Big picture time, guys, and we've got a bonus episode for you. You thought we were done with the season, but here's one more. And on an important subject, we're returning to that thing that you've been asking us to talk about: the economy, debt, inflation, our future as the country that is Kenya, and our future, I guess, as Africans as well, because this is hitting African countries like never before. Now, there's been someone who's been going from pillar to post to talk about inflation, to talk about the debt situation, and he's one of the most surprising proponents of a complete shift in how we do things in this country, given that he's been very invested in this country's economy prior to what's been happening over the past 10 years or so. Mr. Jimmy Wanjigi, businessman and, now politician.
That's correct.
Social commentator. What else should we call you now?
Yeah. Politician.
Yes. This is a very interesting...
But a different kind of politician.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting hat that you're wearing now.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming to our studios here to discuss this. Now, before we get started, I want to introduce a gentleman behind you. His name is Tom Mukwana. So Tom,
Hi.
Yeah. So Tom and Tracy and a bunch of us here do fact-checking on a regular basis. And so part of the thing that we do on this show is try and educate people about different misinformation, disinformation, on various things. And so, of course, because you're here today, it will be about the economy, right? Yeah. Yes. So, Tom, what are
facts and figures?
Facts and figures, right? So, what do we have to do, Tom?
Facts about the percentage of revenue that goes to servicing debt, things that are made online, and also facts to do with some documents about poverty levels in Kenya.
Okay.
Yeah, documents by Mr. Jimmy.
Jimmy Wanjigi.
Yes.
All right.
But he's here to respond.
I think he's talking about the stuff that you have in this Money Heist pamphlet that you have here. So, Jimmy, let's get straight into it, right? You are, as I had mentioned in this introduction, you are one of the, I guess, an outside voice in a sense, in terms of the kind of commentary and the kinds of things that you've been proposing recently. And some who know you as, a very shrewd businessman would wonder, why is Jimmy Wanjigi piping up at this time about the economy? So, Jimmy, why? Why are you so loud about what's going on in the country?
John Allen, let me first say that it's good to be here, and thank you for the invitation. And especially over such an important topic, because there's something that we have been crying for a very long time. Our nature over the last 60 years of our politics has not been about the economy. The country has talked about political reforms and all sorts of shenanigans over the years, and we have progressed greatly. But this is the first time the economy has taken center stage, which tells you that we're at a period of economic liberation. Yeah. Somehow or another, the last 60 years of our lives have not brought us the economic changes that we as a people have sought and that our forefathers fought for this independent country. So we are now at a stage where our general population is understanding this concept of economy. From the price of goods, they're understanding inflation, they're understanding debt, they're understanding a government's role. They were never here, right? They're even understanding neocolonialism. So we have advanced at such a stage that the last elections, if you recall, a lot of our slogans and those of others was that this is an economic revolution. It is the third liberation to our nation. Now that history is very important because you must understand that even when we were colonized, it was about an economy of our colonizers.
It was an extractive
economy. An extractive economy. Now, this has been the issue. And over the years, we have been unable to really grasp this issue. It is actually the moment when we are saying we must be empowered. Now, my view during the elections, which we were stopped, was that we are carrying on basic economic philosophies and policies with the players that were presented to us that have been there and have not worked. And that is basically what we call demand-side economics, where government is the driver of growth, the government is the one that is going to create employment, right? And this has been exasperated after what we have seen out of devolution and so on. Government is everything. You've seen the public sector thriving with government tenders, government being the driver. And some of us have been of the belief that long time ago, in fact over 10 years ago, after I believe we stabilized in the regime of Kibaki, this is now a time for supply side economics, where the private sector drives it.
Before we get into that, I mean, you're right about the intensity of the moment, but perhaps it's not the first time that Kenya has faced such an intense period. I mean, 30 years ago, you look back to 1993, and we were in the doldrums, in essentially almost like a copy-paste of what's happening today, right? So we had a very serious debt crisis. We had a very serious leadership crisis as well. And the country was considering various, very deep-set changes to the economy driven by the International Monetary Fund. That, one would argue, gave way 10 or so years later to the Kibaki presidency, which was a golden era in terms of the regeneration of the economy. But that's why I'm wondering why you want to shift the economic model and not fix the leadership. Because, these economic principles that we're applying in this country have worked elsewhere. It's not that big government is such a problem that it can't work. The problem has been and continues to be corruption, leadership, misgovernance, things that have an impact on the economy but are not the system, the economic system itself. So why talk about a shift to supply-side economics when we still have the same players and the same problems with integrity?
Those were my exact views during the election of last year. But let's go back to a bit of history of what you've talked about in 1993. Yes, those were the problems. And after the 92 elections, the government of President Daniel Arap Moi, I think it was 1995, went to Paris Club, because at the time most of our debt was under the bilaterals that fall under Paris Club. And they sought debt rescheduling. I remember the minister at the time, I think there was Honorable Kemo. And they sought debt rescheduling, which removed debt as an entire burden to a budget. So by the time Mwai Kibaki was coming in 2002, yes, he found a -1 GDP growth rate, first ever in the Republic of Kenya, and the last. But he did not carry over debt. That was one big relief that he had. He did not have the burden of debt that he carried on in 2003. Now, with that relief, Mwai Kibaki actually applied supply-side economics. He literally removed the barriers to the private sector's growth. Look at your media, for example. At the time, you had only 2 TV stations, 1 radio station. He removed the barriers so that the private sector in the media could boom, and marketing boom, because now we could spread our products, whatever we're producing, to a greater market, greater reach. And that's what he did. He actually applied supply-side economics. That was his model. He stimulated the economy with free primary education. Where he said, that will take on as a burden, but I give you back money. And that caused a big catalyst, because you then had money in your pocket and you could do something else with it. Went back into the economy as a stimulus. Now, his was supply side. And he did everything to remove the barriers to the private sector growing, right? And government came in a very strong way, unfortunately. But let me say unfortunately, because it was a bit of a contradiction to supply side. But he needed to boost infrastructure, because there was a very big gap with a -1 GDP that Moi had done. It can tell you that we had stopped growing. So there was a very big gap in infrastructure. But look at what he did. He did roads, they worked on our water, they worked on our fiber optics. All of this, we have become so-called a modern Kenya because of Mwai Kibaki. And he had to start moving us in that direction to bridge the gap. So government was still a big player. But I can assure you the private sector grew. That's why taxation grew from an estimated 180 billion in revenue under the Moi regime to, by the time Mwai Kibaki left, to almost 1 trillion. Right? It grew over 10 years. Right? Cumulatively over 10 years. Now, that worked. Uhuru inherited an economy that was at 6, almost 7% growth rate. He found the coffers were full. They were not empty. But what did the government do? It adopted a style of demand side. Government is the driver of everything. It took our debt from what was then about 18% to what I'm saying today is heading towards 80% of our revenue. This is what happened with demand side.
It's heading to, but it's not there yet. Some estimates put it at 63, others put it at 67.
I would like to give you some details as to where we are drawing that from. We have the actual statement of revenue and exchequer issues as of 28th April. There's one due now for May. Now, it says here, our tax revenue was estimated, revised to 2.1 trillion for this financial year. As of April, end of April, we've collected 1.573 trillion.
So there's a deficit.
Now, that deficit is May and June, right?
The last 2 months.
The last 2 months. We've averaged this at about 150 billion a month. So you add it. So we're saying you get just over 1.8. You can then calculate, because our debt figure also from the Treasury, as payments this financial year is 1,360,985,941, so almost 1.4 trillion.
Yeah.
Calculate the percentage. That's not 65%.
No, of course, it's largely, but it's floating between 60 and 70%.
Have you calculated the percentage difference?
No, I haven't yet. So of course, it's now, out in the open that the past 10 years were disastrous in a sense when it comes to debt and taking on debt. But again, I see this very much as still a problem, not so much with the debt itself. Of course, debt is a huge, huge contributor to the kind of things that we're experiencing now. But it is the use of the debt, where that money went, right? That is a concern, because if you're going to borrow $2 billion in a Eurobond, you should expect to see some sort of multipliers in the economy, right? We didn't witness that. That doesn't seem to be a problem of taking the loan. It seems to be a problem with the people who are using the loan. And that's a leadership problem, not so much the fact that it was a demand-driven economy. Again, so that's why I'm asking why your grouse isn't with leadership, but more with trying to open up the economy.
What I'm trying to do, John Allen, is say that this model of demand side, driven by this leadership that we have witnessed, has not worked for Kenya. And it's time to put the power of our economy in private hands.
It hasn't worked
now,
because
it hasn't
of
worked.
Corruption.
And not only corruption, and I'll say, apart from corruption, there has been a complete delinquency. People here do not follow the law. They do not follow the law. And even aside from corruption, they do not. And it's most frightening.
Yeah, but that,
the 2010, the 2010,
that's a
corruption
issue.
Is one issue.
And that misgovernance, mismanagement is similar.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
This is such a serious problem. We cannot ignore it anymore. Our debt is anchored in our constitution. And yet, it is being flouted every single day. The law says our budget is where our debt is anchored. And our budget is 3 bills. What Parliament passes are 3 bills. One which is being debated today called the Finance Bill, which comes to take our revenue. And then 2, the appropriations, which is you're going to hear in the budget. And there are 2 appropriations books. One is called Development Appropriations. The other is Budget Recurrent. Now, our debt is anchored in our laws from the Constitution right up to Public Finance Management Act in appropriations development. Now, over the last 10 years, our parliament, which passes our debt, has approved in budget appropriations 2 trillion. We did an audit, a forensic audit. And that audit came out and said 2 trillion was approved by Parliament. 2. But what does it say in our statement at Treasury, at Central Bank?
Our debt stock is what? It's, let's see.
This was up to April last year, right? We had said that we audited right up to April last year. And Parliament had approved 2 trillion. Now, at the Central Bank, it said that the last 10 years, 9 years at the time, the government had taken 6 trillion. In fact, 6.1 trillion.
And our debt
so they took,
now is at 9.1.
I don't even want to go there yet. It's very frightening where we are. Now, 6.1 trillion, and we have approved 2. It means that they borrowed 4 trillion above what is approved by Parliament. So which leaders are you talking about? Because you see, Parliament is the only place that approves debt. Now, that debt of 2 trillion that was approved by Parliament did go to projects. They are line itemed. This road was built. This bridge was done. This water project was done. This was the debt. This was taxpayers' revenue towards that project.
Yeah.
It's all in a schedule. But this 4 trillion, above which was not approved by Parliament, we don't know where it went. Because it couldn't have gone for a project.
Yeah.
So when you talk about corruption in that sense, I'm saying it didn't go to a project. So you can't talk about development.
Yeah.
We don't know what this money was.
Or where it
Right?
went.
Or where it went. Because it was not approved according to our laws.
Yeah. So
Okay.
this is the question that you've been raising about odious debt.
Now, it's very frightening because you take the 6.1 trillion that was taken under the Uhuru government. In other words, the 2 approved by Parliament
Plus the 4.
plus the 4.
Plus what's happening, currently. Because
Even before we go currently,
year, yeah.
we said, why is the figure at central bank showing 8.4? Right? We're seeing 6.1 here. So 1.1 trillion not approved, 2 trillion approved.
That's
So we
actually-
found a carryover
Yes.
from Mwai Kibaki of 2.3. So now it reconciled. This was April last year, 8.4. Right? Now, that was now the balance at central bank, saying that we owe 8.4. Now, you see what it presupposes is that we are never paying. We're just taking, but we're never
We're
paying.
not paying back, yeah.
But you go to the budget recurrent, appropriations recurrent. And there, the budget appropriation recurrent carries 3 main items. One is salaries, one is debt payments, right? And the other is what is called operations for government.
Yeah.
In that, our audit showed, just simple calculation, that we over the last 9 years paid 5.6 trillion. So why is it never being credited to this debt that we are seeing in our statement of account at central bank?
Yeah. Where even if we use the current figures now of 9.1 trillion.
Yes. Where's the 5.6?
Where's the 5.6?
Where's the 5.6? Right? So we hold the assertion that the sovereign, which is you and I,
Yeah.
do not owe anybody anything. Because we are proved to. We can say the debt carried over from Mwai Kibaki of 5.3 is accurate. 2.3 rather is
2.3.
accurate. So that was a debt of 4.3. Inclusive of interest, by the way.
Yeah.
We have paid 5.6.
So we've overpaid.
So the Kenyan sovereign has a credit in the account of over $1 trillion. Right? So we should not be paying debt. Now I say this because this is the biggest problem we are facing on the government account.
Yeah.
Now I like to repeat this in very simple terms. If you were earning 100,000 shillings and you went to ask for a bank loan that is more than 30,000 shillings,
Yeah.
right? On the basis of revenue of 100,000 shillings, the bank would tell you that is the maximum. 30% of your revenue to take as a debt, that's your maximum. Right? Because if you take more than that, you're going to have to find a way of borrowing somewhere else to meet your lifestyle. A country is very similar.
Well, similar to the extent that, those terms do apply, but countries are different in that you can extend the term of the loan.
No.
Yeah.
It is a question of revenue. How much of your revenue is going to pay debt? That is the crunk. Right? Never forget that yardage. If we were at 18% of our revenue, 18 shillings of every 100 going to pay debt, and we pass 30, you enter immediately in economic terms what is called a debt trap. All right? You need more and more money to service your debt and your operations. That is why we have been increasing.
So by this argument, then Kenya got into a debt trap in 2015 when, I think the debt to GDP ratio was, I think it was 48% thereabouts. right? So just over that 30%. Of
now, I don't like to use the debt to GDP ratio because it's look at America's debt to GDP ratio.
Yeah.
Right? I can't remember the figure, but I know it's more than even ours. But if you look at the repayment of debt, debt servicing ratio,
yeah,
it is only 13%. And you can see the kind of wars you are seeing in Congress over raising the debt ceiling. And there are 13% of their revenue going to pay debt.
Yeah.
In fact, it's one of the things I intend to present to Parliament on this debate of the debt ceiling, right? And debt being anchored to GDP. I would like to see debt being anchored to our revenue servicing capacity. So when you pass 30%, we passed that, I agree, around 2015 or so.
2015, yeah.
Right? Now, when you pass that, you enter a debt trap. You need more and more debt to service your life. This is why we are where we are, principally. The second is that we've also had a big drop in the shilling.
Yeah.
Right? And if you take our debt stock, especially in dollars, remember we have to raise shillings to pay
our
for those
debts.
dollars.
Yeah.
We've estimated of late that with the current foreign debt stock, every shilling we drop is between 38 and 40 billion shilling increase in our debt, which is a very frightening figure. We are dropping almost a shilling every week, every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right? It's now 140 something.
It's 141 as we speak.
It is
Right.
very frightening.
Yeah.
Just the other day it was 120. So you're looking at that and saying we're headed towards, just on depreciation of the shilling, an increase in debt of another 1 trillion, 800, almost 1 trillion. We're heading there. That is very frightening because we cannot see an end to it.
But there's a precedent in how things can work out, right? So Ghana had a similar balance of payments, crisis. How they worked it out was that they're trying to renegotiate to start paying off their debts in cedis, right? So that takes pressure off of the economy in terms of looking for dollars to be able to do that. We're in a conversation right now with the International Monetary Fund, possibly for a similar arrangement or the extension of the term of our debts. The problem, though, are our commercial lenders. How do you negotiate with guys like that?
I would like to address this in a different way,
Yeah.
so that we are keeping to the problem statement. Right? Why we have a bad economy. Government has been driving the economy. So when you look at government expenditure,
Yeah.
right? Government expenditure, the biggest item outflow of its expenditure is debt. Right?
Yeah.
It's not counties, it is not salaries, it is debt. That is why we have a problem.
Yeah.
And is eating more and more of our revenue every year. The next financial year, it is 1.7 trillion from 1.4
Yeah.
to be paid out.
Because of the Eurobond repayments next year.
Yes. To be paid out is 1.7 at today's exchange rate. We don't know what it will be tomorrow or the day after. It may get to 2 trillion payout
Isn't
in the next financial year.
Isn't the estimation by some people that the dollar could go up almost to 200?
It's the most frightening thing. I don't even like to imagine that
Yeah.
because our life will become horrific here. It's already horrific. Now that will be untenable.
Yeah.
Now, if that is the biggest payment, that means government is sapping revenue from the private sector, from commercial banks, in order to operate. Because if it's 80%, as we're estimating, of our revenue going to debt, government then needs, in terms of, we're giving a 100% sort of term. So let's say 100 shillings, 80 is going to debt. Right? So it's going out, not coming back to Wanjiko. They need about 30 shillings to go to the county, so the negative 1, negative 10.
Negative 10.
You need another 50 shillings to go for salaries.
So they're
You're negative 60. For government operations, you need
haven't
another
paid
30.
Pensions,
Yes.
which
You've
is
not
one of
paid
the
pensions.
first obligations.
You have not, now pensions don't come.
Yeah.
Pensions are, you have not paid pensions.
Yeah, you haven't
right?
paid pensions.
You haven't paid pensions. And you haven't paid OPEX. OPEX is estimated another 30. So you're 90, and you talk about pensions, you are at 100. So if you're earning 100,000 shillings, you've borrowed another 100,000 shillings to live. Right? Which is an impossibility. You've reached the end, you can't borrow more.
Yeah.
So it has sapped money from the banks illegally. Because remember, this is going for recurrent expenditure, not for development.
Yeah.
To feed themselves, to put petrol in cars, to take flights, to pay counties salaries and to pay government salaries.
Yeah.
You're borrowing domestically. This is where the tragedy is, and this is where a break of the law came. Right? Because you have this mountain of debt you cannot deal with. So you've come to break the law and look for money elsewhere. Now, that's where the Eurobond you're talking about. We are supposed to borrow for development. There's no line item in the appropriations on the Eurobond for any development.
No, there I agree. I've spoken to Edward Ouko, I've spoken to Kimani Ichung'wah, interestingly, who say the same thing, that they asked the question and they never really got an answer. It's unclear where the Eurobond went, which, Jimmy, unfortunately brings me back to the same question I've been asking. This is a mismanagement and a corruption issue. I understand that. Now, let's put that aside for a moment. You're talking about supply-side economics, right? The Kenya Kwanza government has proposals on how they want to restart the economy. Number one, through subsidizing production via agriculture. Thus, the conversation about registering 5 million farmers, giving subsidized fertilizer, and hoping for a bumper harvest sometime in the next 3 months or so. Second is by restarting manufacturing. And I think the one vehicle that they're looking at for doing this has been via housing. Sort of like guaranteeing investors in housing repayments for the housing, via the housing levy fund. Right? So two things that are important that could restart the economy, and yet, we're still in the same situation.
John Allen, let me just cut you. Those things are not important.
Agriculture
they
important.
They will not work the way they proposed. The finance bill is where they put their policy documents.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about any other thing they've said. And the finance bill is saying this. We're estimating here that the revenue going to be collected this financial year, ending this month, is about 1.8, maybe almost 1.9. I don't believe it will get 1.9. Right? Trillion.
We still have a deficit.
We still have a deficit. If you read the finance bill, government is proposing with new tax measures. This GDP to tax ratio. To raise revenue in 1 year
of $1 trillion shillings.
In addition to 1.8, 1.9, to go to 2.9 trillion in tax revenue in 1 year. 1 year. I gave you the figure of Mwai Kibaki.
Yeah.
He took it from 180 to almost 1 trillion in 10 years. Cumulatively about 80 billion a year. Uhuru took it from 1 trillion to what we're ending now, because this is his budget, to another 1.8, another 800 billion. Cumulatively in 10 years. And Uhuru inherited a wonderful economy. Beautiful growth rate, money, coffers, not a lot of debt to pay. Right? But the Kenya Kwanza government is proposing
to raise that in a year.
To defeat the record of the previous presidents. What they did in 10 years, they can suddenly, they have got some miracle that will extract from us another 1 trillion in 1 year. They don't even have the capacity to be able to look for that money. It's an absurdity. An absurdity. And anybody who put their pen to that paper is the biggest liar we've ever seen. It is an impossible goal. All right? So when you put an impossible goal, there's nothing else that's credible. So don't talk about housing or fertilizer or anything else. To me, this is a nonsense bill. Right? Because it is fake with its target.
Well,
so it's unachievable.
The target is highly ambitious.
No, it's not highly ambitious. It's an impossibility.
Okay.
Right? In this economy. I don't even want to say we're even in stagnation. I didn't even say even if it was the best of times. Right? It's an impossibility. Unless the government has decided it's raiding us in totality. that 100% of all our income is going to pay the government, then you tell me where the growth is.
That's nowhere.
It kills us. That's what the target is.
Yeah.
So don't tell me about there's some catalyst anyway. There's no catalyst. It's a fake budget. It's a fake finance bill, right? And we must call it out for that. The minute anybody puts a fake target on paper, just like the fake debt, it is an impossibility, it is a lie, it is not going to happen.
Okay.
So
Now,
it is for some other purpose,
Jimmy,
but not for our growth.
you're putting us in a very, well, you're painting a very, very
Now,
difficult situation.
I am
And I understand what the reality is, Jimmy. However, what then is the solution? Now, for someone who's watching this now.
That's the point.
Yeah.
That is why I'm saying
we
we must deal with the biggest outflow of our tax revenue, which is the debt.
Yes.
And there are three ways of dealing with the debt. All right? Three. Right? Directly. The fourth way is what Kenya Kwanza government is trying to do.
To tax us out of it.
Tax us out of it. And you can see what they are targeting because of that problem. It's because of that problem. It's not to catalyze any growth. It's because of that problem. I am saying we address the debt directly. And you mentioned Ghana. Ghana addressed the debt directly. So there are three ways. One, do what President Moi did in 1995, where he literally just went to Paris Club. You had one bilateral donor, right? You had World Bank, IMF, you had the bilateral countries, came under a discussion and said reschedule. This is taking too much revenue of our taxation.
But that's for part of our debt.
No, it was all.
No, I'm saying.
No, I'm saying it is one element. Now, what you can do is do the same thing here. Try and sit down with our components. Unfortunately, unlike Moi, he was only dealing with one
beast.
Club. One club. Here we have got the Chinese, and we have what is called London Club. London Club Eurobonds. Now, this is where the problem is. Firstly, to put them all in a room is a problem. Secondly, because everyone starts bickering, who you're saving from us to pay who, nakuwa maneno mingi. Second, one thing they would demand is an audit of this entire debt. Because everyone wants to know who owes what from who.
But that's a good thing for us.
It's a very good thing for Kenya. The third is a proviso that was put in the London Club debt, these Eurobonds, which are now 900 and something. Because we're taking three batches.
We want to take one next year.
I don't think we can. So it's 900 plus, right, with current exchange rates. Now, they have a very clear proviso in their agreements. Should we ask as a country for rescheduling of our debt, they must be paid in full first. So you cannot sit down until we pay all that money in full. So you can't constitute a rescheduling.
So that's basically that's a technical default that we are declaring.
Straight.
And a technical default, folks, for people watching, is where a government says that it temporarily can't pay its debts, and it triggers now those kinds of clauses,
discussion.
Where you have to pay your debts in full, especially for commercial debt, and that's usually the avenue that a lot of countries that have been in this crisis go through. But anyway, carry on.
The second is what Ghana did. Ghana did what is called a debt distress exchange. So it called in first and foremost its domestic creditors and said, we cannot envisage paying you these interests and these loans and your principals over the next 3 years, literally. So we want to do what is called a swap of your bonds and bills, domestic. That's what it did. Now Ghana, when it did this, had reached a debt service ratio of 70%. 70% of their CD was going towards debt. Very important to understand that. A threshold I'm saying, I believe we have passed.
We've already passed.
Now, this was December last year. Now what that meant was that they insisted that those bonds, they take haircuts. So if you had a bond of 1 million shillings, They said, now we are going to give you a new one, fresh one, of 700,000. So you take a 30% haircut on your principal amount.
Yeah.
And they postponed interest payments, right, to up to 3 years. And said, if you're getting 10%, now we're going to give you 5% in 10 years. Now, that immediately causes what you call a bank crisis.
Yeah.
Right? Where the banks become almost insolvent.
Because they have no cash flow.
They have no cash flow. So that was passed on to account holders. So John, you wake up in the morning, you find 30% of your savings has been cut. Right? 30% of your current account has also been cut, the same 30%. So it went down because if you don't do that, you have a bank crisis. And bank crisis is what happened in Greece, where banks were shut for many years, I think up to 4 years. You have a crisis in Lebanon, that started in 2019, that is still going on today, where banks just shut the doors. After all, their money is your security. Is their security, right? And we are the sovereign. So Ghana is probably the best case to ours.
Yeah, because we've actually tracked very similarly to Ghana.
So now that means that we declare default. We literally say, as you said earlier, that we are unable to meet these commitments. Now everybody who holds our debt come here to the table. Right? And since you can't auction Kenya and take it away,
you have
right?
to renegotiate.
You now renegotiate.
But nuance, that we can't meet the debt as currently constituted.
Yes.
That we need to renegotiate, not that we are insolvent, like we can't do it. That's a distinction that I think a lot of people are missing. That when we declare default, it's like saying, hatuna pesa hata kidogo. You know, we'd have no money. It's just that we don't have
enough
the kind of money to be able to pay you in the schedule that we had proposed.
Not only the kind of money to pay you, we cannot do that and raise more money to service our requirements. So now that means this, that we literally postpone a payment of 1.7 trillion this financial year. That you can give back, but I'll come to that. Right? Now, I can tell you authoritatively today that discussions have already begun. Right? Between the government and banks. I can tell you this authoritatively. The government has called in banks and have said,
local banks.
We have a situation that they believe is a win-win on both sides. Right? We are coming out for bonds and bills, and you're bidding for high interest, but short term. Nobody wants to loan the government more than 90 days. And it's becoming very difficult for the government to meet that commitment. So they're saying you have a lot of long-term bonds, 10-year, 5-year, 3-year bonds. Bring them as stock. So they've calculated a stock of about 600 billion shillings. And they've said, give us back, because those interest rates were done some time ago. Right? At 10 maybe percent. And now the floating interest rate has gone up. So you're going to lose value on them anyway, as banks. So come, we swap. So they're already doing there's a suggestion on the table to do a swap. Now, the negotiations have reached a stage where banks are saying, fine, but we are not going to take more than, we want less than 5 years on all this. And the minimum is 15% interest rate. Right?
15%.
And 15%. And we want, if it's a 10-year bond or even more, fine. We want now below 5 years and we want 15% interest rate. And the government has come back and said, no problem, we can negotiate that, but can you give us another 300 billion?
Jimmy, where are you getting all of this? You said you're reporting this authoritative.
Authoritative, because you know, we have a lot of banker friends. You know, we're in the private sector, so I can tell you this has been going on the last 2 weeks. So this is already a negotiation. Okay, I'm telling you authoritatively, this is already a negotiation. Where they're taking long-term bonds, they are going to switch. They are switching them for shorter-term bonds, higher interest rate, and asking for additional money.
But
right?
do
Now,
banks have
even
that
if
liquidity?
Now, this is the big question, and many of the small banks are not interested in this. The bigger banks are desperate because they can smell what is coming.
Yeah.
This is coming because they can all smell
But
a problem
again,
of payment.
But you see, now just to divert slightly, that's also a problem which in part is of their doing or their participation. You remember
As
when,
banks?
Yes, remember when the Uhuru regime, was offering such tasty, bonds and bills to the banks, they refused to lend to the local market, to you and I.
Yes.
And bought all of and snapped up all of those bonds. So it's a difficult position that we're in a country where you can see what the banks did, right? You know that what they did harmed the economy because they were profiteering basically on a situation in which the country was in.
And we saw those huge profits being declared every year.
Every year on year, profits of in the
now, John,
billions.
for you and I who are the sovereign, we should be saying, where it's not a line item anywhere. And the only other avenue government can take money is short-term cash flow problems that do not go more than 1 year. That's the PFM Act.
Yeah. As
So
they
this
did
debt,
recently with, I think there was a commercial loan that they've just taken, $500 million.
Yeah, but even that, is long-term. It's not even a year. You can't take, PFM is very clear.
Yeah.
You can't take for more than a year.
Yeah.
In other words, there's an emergency, like we had COVID. Emergency.
Yeah. They're saying the emergency is the payment of the counties, payment of the national CDF fund, etc., etc.
Correct. But this, what is this? What is this?
Well, it's
so really,
it's
banks
raising
have
of
been
revenue to be
profiteering.
able to avert the disaster that you've been talking about.
No, it's a balloon. The minute you are going against our laws, we have a problem. You don't correct it by creating more illegality. So we breached. All right? We must have breached somewhere along the way. Because what was there already was that we cannot take more than 40% GDP to debt ratio. So for us to have reached a stage where we're 80% of our revenue going to debt, we must have breached that long time ago. And somehow there's been some false accounting in that. Right? So we've had to now come to borrow illegally in the domestic market because that's illegal borrowing. Before the 2010 Constitution, it was allowed. It was an amorphous gray area in our books. But the 2010 Constitution anchored the only position of our debt in our laws. Now, you can't correct it by saying we create more illegality.
Because we're
in a bad situation. We hold those accountable that put us there, and we bite the bullet because we are the sovereign. Right? We go through our pain, but we come out with clarity thereafter. And we ask ourselves, who is going to take us through that clarity? Okay? That is what we do. You don't just compound the problem, compound the crime. And that's what we're doing.
So, what does biting the bullet mean for me?
It means this. It means what we are proposing is that we declare default. And when we declare default, we must ask ourselves, is that our debt or not? And that was the reason behind our forensic audit. That this is odious debt. It does not come to us as the sovereign. So why should we pay for it? Those who are accountable, who broke our laws, who ensured that this money does not come back to Wanjiku and Mora, must be held accountable, and we must be freed from this monster that is plaguing our lives. It is the biggest reason, the biggest for the high cost of living.
Let us speak in specifics about responsibility, because very soon Kenyans are going to want blood. Who are we talking about?
You see, the 2010 Constitution has a very interesting clause. A very, very interesting clause. It says categorically that the budget and any withdrawal from the budget cannot be activated until it is signed by the president, what are called the presidential warrants.
Presidential warrant, yes.
Now, the presidential warrants activate, presidential warrants in reference to triple presidents were issued to withdraw. So the presidential warrants are issued to withdraw for expenditure. All right? So once you pass the finance bill and the appropriations, the president has to sign a warrant. And I think you've seen those ceremonies.
Yeah.
Where he authorizes the withdrawal for expenditure. And without that signature, the Minister of Finance, and there's no economic, there's no financial activity. So the buck stops with the head of state, according to our constitution.
So number one, you're talking about two presidents essentially, because the illegalities began in the Uhuru regime, they have continued in the Ruto regime.
Now, President Ruto has not signed a presidential warrant yet. He's going to sign.
He's going to,
in this coming budget. And when he does so, he takes responsibility. Right? For all that has happened.
All over the
past. Yes, if the debt payments are in that budget and he accepts, he takes the responsibility. It now becomes his.
So we have two people there now that you're putting in on the noose, right? So that's Uhuru Kenyatta, William Ruto.
Correct.
Who else?
Now, below that, okay, we have to ask ourselves, who are the delinquents that put this on the table of the president?
So I see at those ceremonies and also in the preparation of the finance bill, etc., Cabinet Secretary Finance, his principal secretary, and possibly a couple of other technocrats.
It's the Treasury.
And the Attorney General as well.
100%.
Right?
100%.
Okay, so then now you're talking about at least 8 people.
100%.
Right?
I agree with you.
But there's a much, much bigger crowd of people who should also be there as per this explanation. And that's Parliament.
No, Parliament, their legislative role does not implicate them. Because they will say this was presented. It was presented. Right? They can try and defend the way it was masked. Right? But they can say that we only approved 2 trillion. We even approved the payout of 5.6. But we don't know why.
But
the executive, no, hold on.
But we don't. Debt ceiling numerous times.
Yes, but they'll say the debt ceiling is not necessarily a bill or a law in Parliament.
But it is a function of the payment.
Yes, but it does not hold them to account. You hold them on the acts that they pass. They'll say we approved 2 trillion. We approved 5.6. If the executive was messing up with the numbers up there, they should account.
Okay.
They never approved any odious debt. They didn't. In fact, Parliament should be demanding with this audit, because it's the first ever done, that they want to see the credit of 1.3 trillion back to the Kenyan people. So Parliament, they can get away with that. But the executive is the one here. The executive is in big trouble.
Okay. Let us talk real politics in this country. If you go back to scandals even in the 60s, the maize scandals that implicated close people around the Jomo Kenyatta, the land scandals that have taken place, all scandals up until today, the one thing that Kenyans have been asking for is accountability. And you only ever see accountability perhaps at the technocrat level. You're asking for the heads of state, current and former, to take the pill on our behalf, something that has never happened in this country. Are you also asking for an impossibility?
No.
I'm just speaking real politics.
I can tell you, yes, and this is the real politics. Let me tell you, what we did not have before was the 2010 Constitution.
Yes.
All right? So our president had a lot of avenues.
But Jimmy, look at
to escape.
how many times this constitution has been flouted.
That's the point. That there comes to a point where people must be held accountable.
Okay.
Right? That is why they have public office. They even swear to the constitution and swear to God. They take an oath.
Yeah.
They will abide by it. That is why they must be held accountable. They have a first time for everything. And let me tell you, that's one thing I love about Kenya. It's a place of firsts. We have seen first throughout here.
Well, we've
in fact, democratically,
yes,
and democratically, I don't think there's another African country that is as politically reformed as we are in our laws, in our structures. Right? So we have got the institutions.
Yeah.
We have got the will. Look at the media. If you take the media, talking from boys' time to now, my God, it is a world of difference.
Yeah.
Right? Here we cannot even imagine the internet being shut down. Here there'll be hue and cry like you can't believe. Right? You cannot take away what we have. So there's a first time for everything. And maybe this is the first time. Because I don't think people really interrogated the implications and the power of the sovereign in the new constitution. Maybe apart from its makers.
Yeah.
Those that took power did not really fully understand and appreciate the power that had been given to us, the sovereign, to deal with you as a head of state or anybody in public office.
Yeah.
There's a first time for everything. Today, we are seeing indictments of a former president of the US. If there's any country that has safeguarded that institution, I think there's only one other, way back, almost 50, 60 years ago, that had been charged. Right? This is, it is earth-shaking in America. It's momentous in America.
Momentous, yeah.
We have seen Zuma, a younger democracy than us. Zuma, as a former president. We have seen how many others in Africa that have been put in. And they are not even as reformed as we are. They don't have our structures or our constitution. There's a first time for everything. And it does not mean that we don't push for it. We are pushing for accountability. Right? And the basic thing, what we should be asking, even as a sovereign, is saying, we are not going to pay this debt. I'm very glad that I have seen the initiative of the Senator Umtata to go to court and say we do not owe any money. The Constitutional Court in Mozambique ruled against an odious debt called the tuna bond of $2 billion. And Mozambique has not been paying. And the executive had to hold those in account. So even before we go holding to account, let us as individuals, because we are not on a vengeful mission, say we are not paying. Right? And we should not pay. And it should not make our life the misery that we are currently living. And we are foreseeing in the future. Remove it from our backs. Now, if the executive or others, or parliament and others decide they want to go for people, let them go for people. There are arms of government to do that. But first and foremost, let them remove this burden from us. I think if we can get that, Kenyans will breathe. You have 1.7 trillion that comes back into the economy. Right? It's not going out. So you don't have government now borrowing domestically to fund itself. But more importantly, it is now a time to decide policies, economic policies. And this is what I'm saying, that odious or even debt default will have wide implications on our lives. We'll still see a high inflation rate in the short term. Right? We'll see a depreciation of our currency in the short term. It will be hard, but we'll be seeing a window if there is a proactive approach from government on the supply side economics. So for example, you can say, in this finance bill, they're proposing to raise VAT to 18%, to 16%, sorry, from 8. You can say we can go back to 8 if they pass it, for example. We can give that relief because now we don't need the revenue. Right? We can give all sorts of other tax breaks on Kenyans to lower the cost that we'll be facing of very high inflation. Ghana's inflation went up to 50%. Right? It's now coming down. Right? They can also say, right? We are now no longer going to borrow from banks. Right? We are now going to borrow from pension funds. We are now going to borrow from insurance companies. These are big holders of credit or SACCOs. Right? You imagine if that money now comes back into the banking system, right? For you and I to go and get some loans, we'll be talking about interest of 5% and lower. So it will fuel economic activity.
So this is not borrowing from these institutions in the short term?
Yes, in short or medium. It doesn't need to. You see, it has relief. So you now create a bigger cake, right? And buy yourself time, 2-3 years, right? And you'll be talking a more buoyant economy. But the way they are going with this finance bill, they are sinking us further and further. And I can assure you, eventually we are coming there.
Yeah.
The good thing is that when you begin it early, it's more on your terms. If you do it later,
Then
it's on other
it's on
people's
other
terms.
people's terms. Actually, the advice, at least even looking at the experiences that we've had in the past in Africa, is one of the things to do is take that bitter pill early.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
That we're in agreement about.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, my view, okay, before we get into anything else, is that we must agree the policies that work. And this is a great time to define our economic policies, even as parties, even as candidates, even as a nation. Right? That's why the principles of what you see a conservative or Republican or Labour Party, you see, these are the principles. What is your economic model? What is your ideological philosophy? Right? And I'm saying demand side, which was first and successfully introduced, not first, but one of the most successful stories is Reaganomics.
Yeah. Reaganomics.
Reaganomics. He went in after Carter's economy was in total shambles, demand side. He introduced supply side economics. He said that we had reached a threshold in America, what is called the Laffer curve, right, of collecting tax. Remember, they had all sorts of wars at the time. He said, now, forget it.
Yeah.
Right? America had so much power it can print. So it said, now I'm giving back.
Yeah.
Right? Let people become rich. I'm removing taxation.
But what Reaganomics did is that it created a super wealthy class over 1% and made America one of the most unequal societies in this world today, right? Because the tax breaks were given to people who are in business, in manufacturing, etc. Perhaps even for, even to give him a bone for noble reasons, right? Being able to restart the economy. What has that done today?
It was trickle-down economics.
Exactly.
Right? And it worked. It is still working even today.
To an extent.
Really?
To an extent, Jimmy. That is one of the most unequal societies in the world. I mean, there's lots that's been published about the failures of Reaganomics in terms of the social responsibility of a government to its people.
Now,
yeah,
that is correct.
Yeah.
And that's why government has an evolving role on regulation. On regulation, you saw the antitrust laws and so on. But look at what it did for R&D. When did the IT age come?
Came in the late 80s, early 90s.
Reaganomics, from Reaganomics. All R&D that you're seeing that is running us today started from Reaganomics. The IT world, which is now what is dominating us, came from that. Green energy you're seeing today that's coming in the future has come from that. This huge interbanking and openness and globalization and all these barriers came from that.
Yeah.
It is a success story. It is more successful than the supply side of American economy side. It is more successful, right? And in as much as you're saying it, there's an uneven society, the poverty levels are still very low. Very low as a percentage of population. We have a country today that is multi-dimensional 63% poverty rate. In other words, 63 of 100 Kenyans are struggling for a meal, basics, every year. All right? You think you're going to introduce what? The same method that has taken them there. We need a dynamic shift where government is not the driver.
Yeah.
Right? We are not a nanny state. We are not to be nursemaid. We don't need houses to be built for us. We'll build our own houses. We have that capacity. What we want are the things that we share.
Yeah.
We want our roads. We want our infrastructure because they close markets. We demand water because these are basic human rights. Okay, we need water, right? But really remove the barriers to our growth. We demand a proper, incorrupt police force so that laws are done. We want courts where disputes are adjudicated quickly. This we are prepared to pay for, even aggressively. So the more who have money should pay more.
Yeah.
But really, for a house which we do not share, we don't need. We'll build our own houses, right? We need facilitation. You come out of our income. Don't tax us more. remove the barriers to our expansions. Okay? And you will see Kenyans, first and foremost, nearly every Kenyan is a businessman.
Yeah.
There's no part of this country. You'll not find somebody doing something, even kids, selling even korosho. Okay? We have that knack. It's a very unique knack. Right? We are hardworking, we are ethical, and we like biashara. People like making money. Now, instead of unleashing us, you're putting more burdens on us. Right? A government just needs to open more markets for us. Beyond even our borders. Right? Just around us here, we have about 200 million people. Why are there so many barriers? Why does a Kenyan not think of doing business in Somalia? Right? Or doing it in South Sudan? Or doing it elsewhere? What are these barriers? Right? That are stopping us from growing in these areas. That's what a government should be doing. But getting out of our lives, don't put more burdens on us.
All right.
And that's supply side.
Jimmy, we spent maybe about an hour talking about the problem of debt, as well as some of the solutions that you're offering for the public. Supply side economics being, the spearhead of your solutions, right? But I'm sitting here across from, one of the most interesting businessmen of Kenya's perhaps 20, 30 years. And I'm wondering to myself, what is this businessman's selfish interest in this new direction? So why we understand what the public and prurient interest might be in this new direction, but what's Jimmy Wanjigi's interest?
I'll tell you. First and foremost, I'm a Kenyan. And you want to put me to business, I'll tell you. As a businessman, there's no joy in making money where there's no money. There's no joy. There's nothing. Any businessman worth his salt wants a big market. So you want an empowered people, right? You can't make money, and there's no joy in making money out of poverty. So if I'm to talk as a businessman, I'll tell you, I would like to see Kenyans very wealthy. Because that is soko. The more Kenyans that have got money, the more soko there is for all of us. That's one. Two, I also believe we are a very great people, and we are underperforming. Our potential is beyond these borders of ours here. We are so great that we should be economically conquering beyond our borders. We have a big market in sub-Saharan Africa of 1 billion people. Look at the greatness of India and China. Numbers. We are not stretching out to those numbers. Yet we have something very unique in us. As a people, I can tell you, I have traveled this continent. We have something very unique. But for some reason, we are stifled. We are made to think small. So we're made to think of scarcity, not of growth.
So the wet blanket is the government.
Is the government. It's been the biggest oppressor, right? And even apart from that, even neocolonialism has been an oppressor. We must stop thinking scarcity. We must start thinking growth. We must start thinking big. Because that's where some of us are in terms of our minds. We have such amazing potential. Now I know this because I'm somebody, right, who has grown up fairly privileged, right? Fairly privileged. I have never costered food. I have never costered basic things, right, all my life. Now, why? What makes me so special as a Kenyan? We are all God's children here. Every Kenyan has that right, and should be able to get it, unless they just want to sleep. Right? Every Kenyan should have access to it. Do you think there's a Mzungu who wakes up in the morning believing that he will not get food? Yet we are being made to think about the price of unga. Unga being a scarcity for 63% of Kenyans. We have got to start getting out of our scarcity mentality. Scarcity mentality, and start thinking conquest. Start thinking big, start looking at a very different paradigm shift to the way we've lived. And government is not going to be our nursemaid. It has done it for 60 years, right? And all they've done is stifle our growth. They need to actually get out of the way. We need poor government. We need them less in our lives. We are capable of managing without them, right? You bring us some few regulations here and there so that we deal with excesses, right? Make sure we follow the law, but really get out of our lives.
That's Jimmy Wanjigi, the businessman. But you're a politician now.
Yes.
What is your selfish interest in this?
My selfish interest? You know, I'm now 60. And when you reach my age and you have a modicum of self-actualization, you look at yourself and you say, we have another 30 years to put your name in history. And many people reach my age, my status, decide you're either going into philanthropy or you're doing those sort of things, right? I would like to be remembered politically as the greatest change agent Kenya has ever seen. And these things normally come from somebody who's been inside, not from outside, from inside.
Yeah.
That I can tell you is the greatest blessing one can do, because then you really know you have lived and have lived God's purpose.
I want to ask this another way. You've defined yourself as an insider, someone who's been in the belly of the beast, at the coalface of what's been happening. You know all of these players. People who look back to 2003, 2004 might see your statement of self-actualization as maybe one more aligned to mea culpa, being that you have also had your name mired in controversy with regard to Anglo leasing. There are some people, who might see you as a tenderpreneur. There might be people who even legitimately define you as that. So is it Jimmy Wanjigi, the person who's building a legacy, or Jimmy Wanjigi, the person who has, gotten onto the road to Damascus?
I've always been on the road to Damascus. That has never changed. One day, I will tell the entire story of all that was going on in those early years. Because the early years of Kibaki were a very interesting period. They were first and foremost one of the biggest breaks of a neo-colonial era that was holding a government. It was a time when there was the infusion of the Chinese into this economy. A break from our colonial masters, previous colonial masters, that was still very embedded here. It is a much larger fight than you imagine. So when some of us were being brought in, I think you need to understand its concept, because we were very influential in that government, right? And when you want to have that discussion, I will come, because it's a very interesting tale that goes very far back in our history. That colonization mode still continues. And it's important you understand the fights in this. Even this debt, when it is properly looked at, you will find that hand.
Of course.
You will find that hand.
Of course.
Where we are continually kept down.
Yeah.
Because as long as our prices, our income levels are low, they can exist the life that they exist.
I understand that, Jimmy.
Good.
I understand that there's a neo-colonial fight.
So when there is a change,
like
what happened in 2002, it was a dramatic shift. Kibaki's supply-side economics and Kibaki's avenue of opening up to new players caused a very big stir. And many of us got caught into it. It was more noise than reality. It was more political and economic alignments of foreigners rather than even local. So it was a very big game. And I would love to come for that story. That's what I'm saying. I have been inside. I've always been a man on the road to Damascus.